And good morning, everybody. It's fantastic welcoming you here in our virtual auditorium to our next episode in our Tomorrow's Beautiful webinar series. And today, our special guest is Dr. Carla Enslin with a talk on brand reputation and corporate citizenship. That's a theme that's very close to our hearts in our aspirations of developing ethical leaders for the common good. So, Carla, welcome to our virtual auditorium, and thank you so much for your willingness to share your insights with our audience today. Colleagues, just a little bit about Carla. She's head of postgraduate studies and research at Vega School, a brand of the Independent Institute of Education, which offers qualifications in design, brand, and business studies. And Carla's interest and experience in brand building includes the design and implementation of brand identity systems, brand alignment, and contact strategies. She lectures widely in Africa and abroad and conducts corporate training, consulting, coaching, course supervisor and trainer for the Master of Arts and the Doctorate in Brand Leadership at Vega. She's a research associate at the University of Stellenbosch Business School, also a teaching fellow at the University of Cape Town's Graduate Business School. So fantastic having you here, Carla. And without any further ado, I'm handing over the steering wheel to you.
Thank you so much, Quibus. And thank you also to Michaela, who is our expert navigator this morning, moving us from slide to slide. It's an absolute privilege being with you and being in conversation wherever you find yourself at this point in time. Hopefully safe and ensconced at home and under very trying circumstances from a family, community and a network point of view. So thank you for being with us, for sharing an hour of your time, and really looking forward to your thoughts on this conversation, and not only questions that you might have, but observations. It really is a challenging conversation to align brand reputation and citizenship in the world of really understanding who you are and holding yourself ethically as an individual and as a company, perhaps a social movement or a political party, because they all exist as brands, is remarkably challenging. And Michaela, if we touch on the relationship between Milpark and the next slide, Vega, in the same voice we find two active brands. Milpark really working towards launching leaders for good, with a very, very strong civic identity. Equally so from Independent Institute of Education and Vega perspective, we really believe that the world needs, and if ever before, our country needs real, committed and creative solution seekers, which really then takes us into the conversation and touching on the next element in our set of constructs that we're going to touch on. I'd like to move to the next slide and really reflect on a question that I often grapple with, and it may seem obvious at a glance. It certainly isn't. If you begin to unpack what a brand is and whether anything and everything could actually claim to exist as a brand, which is not a space in which I find my own sense of strategic comfort. I don't believe every person exists as a brand. I don't believe that is an entirely fair expectation or a healthy reflection of human identity. There's a committed desire to launch a brand, to create a social construct with a particular identity, to take on a cause or position yourself uniquely in a particular segment, and to invest in building a brand. But I'd encourage you to constantly hold this thought. You may be active in the world of business, in perhaps a civic role in government. Perhaps you're involved with a social movement or the founder of a new invention or an emerging concept as an entrepreneur. You really need to grapple with, when does a brand emerge and when does a brand come into being, and what strategic effort is invested in building a brand. If we then concentrate on reputation and citizenship and the ethic of upholding who you are and delivering on your promises, how do you go about building a meaningful brand? So as much as I grapple with these constructs, I hope that you are considering them in context of your own reality, of what it is that you wish to achieve in building a brand. Touching on the next element then, and moving on with the slides, we also understand that we live in a remarkably connected world, in a world that so many today define as not only a hyper-competitive world, perhaps even on levels beyond our need, but certainly also a hyper-connected world, a society where influence and power can shift in an instant. We're dealing with whole new ideas around constructs that we've never encountered before, cancel culture. A colleague at Google, and of course our own country director at Google, Dr. Alistair McQueen, uses the term of multi-moment brand building. And just get your head around that for a second in context of this living example that you have in front of you. It's a multi-moment brand building world. It's not just a question of things shifting or potentially shifting in a second. It's a multiple of things that could shift in seconds. In a world that is, well, practically never asleep in terms of its ability to influence a power base, or to influence a community, or to influence a customer segment. And of course, equally so, we have a voice as citizens and customers. As a matter of fact, we are co-creating many brands today. And we certainly, with cancel culture, have the ability to impact what it is that businesses stand for, or how they perform as vessels of change. How political parties are positioned, how cities develop and define themselves, and how countries present themselves as brands. If we touch on the next slide and the strategic movement in this space, it's really interesting to see how different players, and often beyond the world of brand building, take ownership of this and realize how these power relations actually shift and exist. And I really enjoyed this idea of like-minded communities and this notion of shared experience campfires or campfires. Think about a campfire, communities gathering around a campfire, really connecting with a brand for a particular reason. And in many ways, if you think about the position that we hold as businesses, brands, or political parties and brands, and living in a digitized world, perhaps we more frequently find ourselves knocking on the doors of these communities to be allowed into the conversation. We're no longer, as brands, necessarily in control of the conversation, nor are we perhaps packing the campfire. The campfire exists, the community exists, the reason for connecting may exist for reasons well beyond us. And we need to recognize what the impact of this is in strategic brand building. which really takes us to the next slide and unpacking why it is that we're spending time together today. And rather than gather perhaps the definitions of colleagues or practitioners, I traveled back to a basic thesaurus analysis of the notion of reputation and citizenship, what it means to be a citizen of a particular campfire community, or a citizen as we possibly know it more frequently and traditionally in a country or community context, and then the notion of ethic. Let's just take a second at this level to consider the various elements that make up reputation and citizenship and ethic. And from your position at this point in time, just making your thoughts known in a community of people, our own campfire, and we're standing 56 strong in this campfire, which particular concept do you connect with most? If you consider reputation, just use the chat room or the chat space. If you consider reputation, what thought do you connect with most in really strategically assessing reputation? And what thought do you hold on to as the essence of reputation? And equally so with citizenship. Where do you situate yourself in making sense of any one of these concepts? Let's just give this a second and see how we respond to these thoughts in our chat stream. Let's see which elements that you have on the slide in front of you find themselves most closely aligned with your idea of reputation, your idea of citizenship, your idea of ethic. So Ashwin, you're really connecting with the idea of honor, adding that critical you. Reputation really is a question of honor, also drawn to honor. And that's from our host. Any other concepts that we're connecting with? And you're more than welcome to add your own if you feel that there's a thought lack. Honor seems to be the concept that we connect with most at this stage. Character, Natalie. So the whole idea of having and holding a sense of character through all circumstances at all points in time. Honor is in all probability then a question of upholding character over time. And then Christian really reflecting on trust, also an outcome, very difficult to trust unless there's a sense of character and honor upheld over time. And then Vera is suggesting that integrity, also a very, very challenging concept to claim. No, I have integrity, or is integrity something that is bestowed upon me as a result of having a character and honoring my sense of character? I love the language you're using. I find myself I'm drawn to someone who is empathetic. Samantha, so you're really adding a variable here that you feel is central to, in all probability, not only reputation, but also citizenship and ethic. Could you really have ethic or qualify as a citizen with character and honor if you are not empathetic? Live beyond yourself. Also recognize that you are who you are as a result of others, as a result of citizenry and the ethic that surrounds you. Good morning, Tabi Singh. Good to hear your voice. Touching on the next slide and holding on to your thoughts, considering reputation, citizenship, and ethic, let's connect with strategic brand building. where we find ourselves at, and what the strategic principles are that we need to engage with. Thanks, Michaela. We can move on to a thought that is very much my sense of north in strategic brand building. You're more than welcome to not only reflect on it, but take ownership of it, shift it, move it, add the variables that you believe should also be considered in effective strategic brand building. But I think if you consider brand strategy in relation to business and marketing strategy, in relation to any other form of strategic practice, it would be healthy and meaningful to recognize that the origin sits in who you are, and why you exist as a business or a political party or a city for that matter. Who are you? What is your unique reason for being? So I always depart with brand strategy, working towards reputation, understanding what it is that I'm rooting the sense of ethic in. And then to your own point, trust, integrity, the notion of character, all a result of understanding in very clear and committed terms who you are, why you exist as an organization. Identity then leads into connecting with your stakeholder communities and understanding who your most influential stakeholder groups are. This is what makes brand strategy so fascinating a space and relates it to business strategy, marketing strategy, political strategy, governance, is our role and responsibility in any environment, in any boardroom, is to uncover the unique meaning of the organization and to ensure that we move beyond a customer expectation. So the customer segment, the consumer segment, the voter segment, the citizenry would all be primary stakeholder groups. But as a brand strategist, you have to be mindful of the fact that there are a myriad of stakeholder communities, from the media to unions to government itself, that could full well influence what it is that you stand for, how effectively you're able to perform, to what extent you're able to uphold yourself with honor, respect your character, practice with empathy, and hopefully find yourself trusted by the stakeholder communities that you aim to connect with, which then leans into how you grow and develop over time. Waiting for our session to start this morning, our host Quibus reflected on his own field of research and strategic activity in entrepreneurship. If you look at venture capitalism and the idea of new brands emerging on our continent, you have to consider your identity in the here and now, but also envision what it is that you wish to achieve over time. You need to consider how you aim to evolve your model and reach across current product portfolios or service offerings into extended portfolios and offerings. What is it that you wish to achieve over time, and what vision do you have in mind? And that really addresses your architecture. My point is that reputation, the ethic ensconced in it, your desire to practice your brand citizenry, all depends on your unique reason for existing, all depends on your ability to really make that meaning known to your stakeholder groups, to compel them to want to be part of your brand environment or ecosystem, if I were to put it that way. And then you need to consider how that models itself over time, how you wish to engineer the business to achieve it, or evolve the political party to move from a liberation movement to a political position, to a governance position if we consider our own relationship with the African National Congress. These examples are situated in everything that we do and every brand that finds its sense of being in markets or segments or communities. And ultimately, then, that is how you go about shaping the model that upholds it, the business model, the processes, the systems that you're about to invest in, and that you wish to consider in future mergers and acquisitions. So perhaps a very simple line of reasoning, but reflecting on a sense of north, which I think is key to reputation, which is key to a sense of ethic. You have to have a north. You have to understand why it is that you exist and why it is that you do what you do. Taking this slide one step further into our next element and next slide, a conversation that for me became a very real reflection, and for many in the brand community and business community, a very real understanding of how we are seen and considered, was a conversation between Bruce Whitfield and Richard Quest just before the breakouts and pandemic. I'm sharing this link with you today, and please do go and have a look at this interview. It's a fairly lengthy YouTube clip, but 3 minutes and 34 seconds into this conversation, you'll find a point in time where Bruce and Richard, knowing one another very well, they often have their interviews as divorce takes on traction, and Quest responds to a set of questions that Bruce puts to him, and in this context, an absolute reflection of how we are perceived, of brand image meeting brand identity. And Michaela, if we flip to the next slide, I've really just pulled 3 questions that were posed, the answers delivered, and I'm going to focus mostly on his response to the very first question. Brand South Africa, in real terms, has tried to put scarves around my neck. Of course, something that we do is a welcoming gesture, but it hasn't got the same profile as in previous years. There's no point in coming here to say, invest in me, if you don't have the policies worthy of it. Well, yeah, a very harsh and immediate reality, a very real understanding of how it is that we are experienced, a very real reflection on how our performance is considered. And here a turn in conversation suddenly turns around and says, well, actually, the entire economy was hijacked and we're not even sure we've dealt with it. How many people have gone to prison so far? So at this point in time, I'm reflecting on our understanding of brand building and the many, many levels on which a brand is built, the many, many touch points involved, the many points of connect at which we need to perform in order to compel stakeholders, in order to convince communities that we're a brand worth investing in. I'm using raw examples at this point in time, but it's so close to our current reality. And they are moments of truth for every single brand. There are certain touch points that you have with different stakeholders where you simply cannot afford to fail because of what you stand for. And those we refer to as your brand resonators. Because of who you are, you certainly need to perform at that particular touch point. It's critical to mission success. It's critical to all those beautiful constructs you flagged. Trust, integrity, character, not possible unless we perform at those particular touch points because of who we are. Michaela, if we take the next slide into consideration, then there are so many ways in which we're being measured as a brand. And Of course, you're involved in this conversation today, but involved with a particular organization. Perhaps you're thinking of your own company environment at this stage. Perhaps you're the founder of a brand or about to launch yourself as an influencer or introduce a new product or service to the market. My point is that you're surrounded by a community of stakeholders who would be measuring you constantly, utilizing an index of concern as much as you need to be mindful of the indexes that would influence how you are perceived. You ultimately need to understand who you are and how your identity relates to the most critical indexes to track. So is it at this point in time a question of really addressing corruption? Is it a question of really addressing our global competitiveness? Are we able to strategically layer decision-making, strategically layer the plans that we need to roll out? Are we able to strategically layer our investments? And at the heart of it stands the brand. At the heart of it stands our reason for being together. And addressing this then, how we are seen, perceived, tracked, our equity measured, let's take the next step and consider the next slide in context with perhaps, or just one slide back, Michaela. Thank you very much. There we go, is the notion that we so often, like a very, very warm blanket, identified by, not only in our own local identity, in our own sense of South Africanness, but also by so many out there, the notion of Ubuntu and what that means in context of the South African identity. And equally so, if we consider that its meaning is situated in the idea of I'm a person because of other persons, or you are a person because of other people. It's a principle of humanity that so many philosophers in our country perspective have argued goes well beyond our very own borders. How do we find that sense of identity ensconced at this point in time and practiced in real terms? And then we take the next slide, and I'm really just weaving thoughts at this stage as you're constructing your own strategic reality of brand building. Michaela, if we then touch on one of the latest releases, you find an edition in Thinking the Future, a book published this year, with various scenarios in mind, futures thinking at work. And of course, we know Santa and Ilbury for their thoughts around political futures and brand futures and economic futures and the notion of a people's economy. One of the possible scenarios, the work achieved by Mandela and others constitutes unfinished business. In the sequel, the government creates an inclusive economy with a new generation of young entrepreneurs at the helm. Taking on the next slide, and yes, Nelly, you're really touching on an ethical issue that I would love to hear your voice on as well. How then do you situate yourself as Brand South Africa? Or how then do you situate yourself as a corporate brand at this point in time? And here I'm going to simplify things by touching on 3 principles in essence. If you consider brand building in a conversation and a beautiful series hosted by Milpark around the ethic of it, then brand strategy is strategy for uniqueness and meaning. But best it be a uniqueness and a meaning that you can uphold, a uniqueness and a meaning that you practice that shapes your north. And then, of course, there's the coal face, there's reality. We encounter hurdles, we encounter significant challenges. but you're still holding on to that sense of certainty. And today, from the Harvard Business Review to current academic articles, we find the word purpose left, right, and center. Careful that it doesn't slip into a wallpaper term. Understand what it means to argue that you have a purpose or reason for existing. But ethic would suggest, reputation would suggest, the citizenship of brand or the citizenry of a brand would suggest that you're not only clear on who you are and what significant value you add or wish to add, but you're committed. So even though you fail at points in time, you have your north. You're trying to deliver on that definitive sense of uniqueness in everything that you do. When you fail, you live in such a hyper-connected environment that to uphold character, back to your chat space, to hold your integrity, it's best to be transparent, to invite all of your stakeholder communities into the fold and co-construct and co-work and co-ignite, make that purpose possible, co-play a role in making it happen. So from my perspective, brand as an ecosystem suggests that everything is connected. There is no touch point that does not have the ability to influence what people think, feel, and believe about a brand. Whether that brand is a product or a service, a political party, a country, a city, a person brand, a nano-influencer. If you understand who you are and what unique value you hold, be mindful of the ethic, the reputation, the citizenry of brand building today in a very connected, a hyper-connected environment. And I'm going to reinforce Alistair McQueen's statement or argument of living in a multi-moment world. As a matter of fact, I think it's become incredibly challenging to uphold integrity and ethic if you don't believe in what you stand for, if you're uncertain of your brand purpose. And we've seen that as well. Very interesting to go and have a look at. And just a side thought, have a look at Interbrand and their equity assessment of our performance, our collective global performance as brands at the end of 2020, where there's a clear correlation with the brands that entered the pandemic certain of who they are, in 2 seconds able to express their exact unique reason for existing and their performance throughout the time. If you're in a time of crisis, need to be agile in response, introduce the word repurpose. How do you repurpose if you're uncertain of your purpose in the first place? And that is where ethic and reputation start sliding all over the place. So it's a 360 stakeholder orientation. And I realize and I respect that the 3 principles in front of us may be simple in notion and perhaps very easy to talk to and be passionate about. They're incredibly challenging to uphold, remarkably challenging to implement. And then again, in context of the Samantha's observation around empathy, it's near impossible to do all of this on your own as a leadership team or as a founder or a leader. You are what you are as a result of others. And for that reason, to regard your stakeholder community as co-creators in building your brand is a very healthy, if not a very ethical stance to take. Touching on the next slide then, and pulling all of this together, I think it's also important to reflect on how we're performing in brand building, and definitely part of our daily driving force when you have conversations with brand practitioners. Havas is and there you see the name of the company right at the top, just cut off the slide, but it's spelled Havas. Havas. and they conduct a global study, fairly significant global study every other year, focusing on those brands that you and I feel add value to how we live life. So again, whether it's a product or a service, whether it's a political party, to what extent do I feel that it serves a particular purpose in my life in real and concrete terms? And their results are daunting. We, as a community, global community, I am generalizing and respect the fact that I am, we wouldn't care if 77% of brands disappeared overnight. We find a great deal of brand content meaningless. Don't we play a significant role in understanding who we are, in ensuring that our strategies align? It really is important as businesses and organizations to revisit how it is that we strategically align ourselves, back to that systemic loop that I've traveled through in our conversation, which really takes us to the last 2-3 slides before we introduce conversation and before we take on some really interesting questions and just, co-create some thoughts in our own chat space. But that reinforcement of the systemic loop would be your own sense of reality in building your brand environment, or contributing to building your own brand environment, in questioning your own sense of brand purpose, if you do consider yourself as a person brand. And then I would encourage you, in your own language, in your own sense of strategic understanding of brand building and how it relates to business, marketing, governance, whatever the challenge in the ecosystem might be, or what the identity of that ecosystem might be, to really construct your own idea of what a meaningful brand is. And this is my attempt as a final slide, then touching on what it is to be meaningful, purposeful, to be careful when we use terms such as, what's the other one? Authentic. I'm a truly authentic brand. Very big word to use. Authenticity suggests 3 strategic outcomes. You really do have a unique identity. You really are able to deliver on it. And none of us can claim authenticity unless we've sustained it over time. So again, perhaps a concept that you can't claim and we should never use in relation to ourselves as brands, but rather find ourselves blessed when it's bestowed upon us by the stakeholder communities that we work with. So the construction that I'm playing with, and I by no means regard it as complete or perfect, but at this point in life and working with different environments, from my own space at Vega and the role I have there, to the clients that we work with, to the research studies that our masters and doctoral students invest in every instance, I'm trying to better understand what makes for a meaningful brand. And it really is a social construct at this stage that delivers and sustains a unique and meaningful value for all its stakeholders at every point of contact. Yes, I've got a perfect picture there. And I'm not entirely sure how many brands actually succeed at being a 360 wholesome player at every point in time. Is it even possible to be that? Perhaps no. But therein lies the beauty of this conversation and Milpark's idea of exploring ethic in relation to reputation and practicing with strategic intent. Over to you, Quivers, and all of the rich thoughts that have been shared in our chat space.
Sure, Carla, thank you so much. I mean, the richness of the insights and the wisdom that you've shared with us, and I would acknowledge I'm probably the slowest reflector of everybody in this audience. So there's so much that I'm, still reflecting on and thinking on, and so much takeaway. Thank you so much. I mean, you've taken us from the point, framing the kind of challenge from a country perspective where we really need creative solutions, highlighted the hyper-connected world and these shifts that take place sometimes in literally minutes. And I made a note of that kind of the thing that you refer to, the multi-moment brand building world, that this is kind of something that goes from moment to moment, and how we as customers, we in this ecosystem have various roles. One of them would be customers, and how we co-create some of these brands. And then you took it through to even the country level, how countries present themselves. And then I can't recall the name you call that cycle, but starting off with the identity of the organization. And, my sense is that even at that point, the identity of the organization, we're embedded in the values and the purpose, the ethics and norms and values should be prominent, and on which this identity is built. And then considering my stakeholders, and I'm oversimplifying now, which drives or leads us to the actual architecture of the organization, and ultimately this business model associated with the governance thereof. And I think towards the end, what particularly for me as a takeaway was your reference to the meaningful or the purposeful brand, and I'm quote, a social construct that delivers and sustains a unique and meaningful value for all its stakeholders at every point of contact. That is so beautiful. Something that, if you give us permission, I would really like to also share with the rest of our team to really reflect on and make it our own, because that at every point of contact is so important. But Carla, let me get to some of the questions we have here for you this morning, and the one there being from let me see, from Vera, asking, how would one recover from our poor brand of South Africa? People are scared to invest or to visit South Africa. What would your thoughts be on that one, Carla?
I think to apply exactly what Samantha also suggested in the conversation is to really consider from a strategic brand building point of view what the priorities are, and to be very careful in assuming that we understand what they are. So if we would first of all have to consider whose position are we having a conversation about. Are we talking about tourism? Are we talking about brand South Africa? Are we considering governance and leadership? So brand strategy, really important to move from the outside in with empathy to really understand where the thinking is at this stage.
Right.
But to rebuild is to rebuild with integrity. Where we failed, shine a light on the failure, but commit to that sense of north. So I think the principles at this stage would be, are we clear on what it is that we wish to achieve? Are we committed to achieving it? Is there a sense of certainty? And to then delivering at every point of contact. So those C's really need to become meaningful, but you've got a multi-stakeholder challenge. So it's prioritizing the strategic communities, the strategic goals, and then really moving with empathy through those fields of understanding and committing ourselves collectively. Citizenry involved, every single one of us play a role. I'm just listening to conversations in our own organization and beyond. The language, how we position our conversations currently, critical in how we stand together as a citizenry.
Absolutely. And as you were reflecting on the question, or what you shared with us, I was thinking as you talked through it, how complex it actually is, and there's not I would say a one recipe type of thing to say, okay, now within 2-3 days we can just recover from what is perceived. And as when you refer to the discussion between those two journalists, there's perceptions as well, and the importance of us as, we have the micro and meso, and the macro, meso, and the micro level. Me as an individual, I'm a citizen of the country. What role can I play? And I don't know, how can I contribute to this? But as you said, there are numerous aspects that would require. And I'm just thinking now of purpose. If as a collective, as a collective, that I think that would be a major something to overcome. But reaching consensus in that purpose as a country as well. But sure, Carla, thank you. I think individually we also have to ask ourselves the question, instead of what you referred to being contributing to what might be perceived outside as everything's bad, how can I turn it around? What can I convey to people that I also engage with?
Every touch point matters. Every communication matters. Everything has a ripple effect. The ripple effect becomes the collective. We play a role with every conversation that we have, individually in our companies, collectively as companies, as categories. It's an ecosystem of activity.
Exactly. Now, you referred to the creative solutions and in terms such as co-creation, and all our individual participation in one shape, form, or the other in this hyper-connected world. Everybody's on the mobiles and forwarding stuff, and etc. But in any event, complexity is one of the areas that I also find fascinating, and I think this is one of those. Carla, there's another question here from Millie. How are brands affected by the environment in which they operate, taking into consideration the issues of personal ethical dilemmas? How are brands affected by the environment in which they operate, taking consideration of the issues of personal ethical dilemmas?
It's a beautifully framed question that can be interpreted in a myriad of ways. So Millie, please forgive me if my interpretation is not exactly what it is that you're grappling with. But I think you're touching on the holy grail in brand building, and it is the toughest challenge that we face. And that's why I said I'm having this conversation with great respect, because it's one thing to get excited about this is how strategy should flow and we should all be purposeful brands. There is the goal, that is the strategic vision. It is quite another to make it happen and to perform at every point of contact and sustain that over time. The construct you're touching on, I think, is brand alignment or alignment strategy, which really in an ideal world suggests that in a perfect ecosystem, things are aligned. And I feel my personal ethic aligned with the environment that I'm in, whether it is in my relationship with my husband, my family, my close-knit network, my organization, my business. We live in different environments. in a brand, the more traditional brand context, in an organizational context, we now see the emergence of talent alignment strategies and human resources waking up to the fact that talent attraction, first and foremost, involves aligning the organization or attracting the talent that naturally aligns with what the business and the brand stands for. Your CV, next factor. Your years of experience, third factor, because I can't unpack your personality and I can't unpack what it is that you carry as a value system. We can work on the CV and you can always study an MBA. So I don't know whether I'm leaning into the space that you're grappling with, but alignment strategy is where most of us spend most of our time really working hard at the coalface to make it happen for all the right reasons, and you keep on trying.
Fantastic. Melly, I think that's a beautifully comprehensive answer to that question of yours. Please, colleagues, if there are any other questions, you are welcome to drop them in here, which I will then present to Carla. But Carla, I was thinking, again, thinking or considering the ecosystem approach with multiple stakeholders, and we talk about the collective, but also recognizing the individual within the part of a collective. In your view, let me first share my thought, and I'm by no means, I might interpret or define my taxonomy might not be accurate, but I think even at an individual level, we are building brands on a daily basis. We kind of set up a LinkedIn profile. We tell the world there what we are a superhero at, what we're very good at or something. But as the individual, there's mostly, in many cases, also a link with an organization. So what are your views in terms of the link between individual brand and organizational brand? And are there potentially risks of non-alignment potentially? Maybe an example. The organization's purpose is very well articulated. It comes through in the brand, etc., etc. But the individual, on the other hand, whether it being ideological, political, whatever the reason might be, kind of pushes another narrative in his or her own capacity.
I think remarkably challenging and potentially very harmful, in the sense that, again, I would encourage us to really consider brand strategy from the outside in. As a person in connecting with a product or service, or again, any other political brand, that we exist on many different levels as brands. But what do I take as the most truthful, let's use a construct that we wrestled with this morning, reflection of the brand? Your billboard, your beautifully crafted 3-minute branded entertainment that I can, view on YouTube, or an actual moment of contact with the people of the brand. Where is the ethics situated? I could really be entertained by the one, love your image, but it really is the interface with your people and the performance of your actual product and how well your service is adding value to my life, where the integrity sits, to use the next construct in the chat stream. So I think potentially vastly more harmful than a shallow 30-second ad or a print ad that is perhaps not very influential person contact.
Yeah, I think somebody once said about, refer to the integrity gap, that thing that what am I saying on the one end and what are my actions on the other? And then I think, if we think about the products that we consume and sometimes the disappointments that we have with service delivery and some etc. So again, to me, from the ethics within that, if I tell the world as a company, as a business, on the billboards, that, and I'm saying this tongue in cheek, we walk on water, we make magic, we make everything beautiful, but the customer experience is otherwise, and that things eventually end up with slander on social media, or a Hello Peter, that type of thing. So how would you advise a business? How can we go about or endeavor to inculcate the importance of ethics? Because on the one hand, there might be a hard effort to produce this and to put this message out there to the world, but the people who have line of sight of the customer or front line, there's a disconnect. So any suggestions on how a business could approach that in really endeavoring to make everybody drawn into this way of thinking, let me call it a dominant logic within the organization?
Yeah. And that's such an important construct, the dominant logic. First of all, I don't think a leadership team should ever curb ambition and vision. There is a reason for a brand to come into being, and founders have a particular shift in behavior and thinking in mind. It's a powerful thing to have a vision, a brand purpose. But equally so, a brand is not a promise made, it's a promise kept. And that is not a statement that I can claim. It's a statement, I think, that was introduced by a thinker such as Bullmore at a point in time, but one that you should certainly hold on to. A brand is not a promise made, it's a promise kept. So how do I ethically build, and I'm going to use your beautiful idea of dominant logic here, Kobus. How do we create a culture in which we are all crystal clear on what it is that we wish to achieve? We're all committed, and yet we know that there will be points in time that we fail by being transparent, by having integrity. We all fail at points in time, but it's when you realize we admit failure, we get together with the stakeholder groups involved, we co-create the best solution in the best interest of the ecosystem that upholds our brand identity system, and we work at implementing it. Where we cause harm is where we create a false sconce. We suggest that we're pulling it all off and we're performing on all levels. We're not treating you with the respect and integrity that you deserve, that we need to uphold and engage and co-shift things together. There is so much to be considered, and another beautiful case study to go and have a look at. Volvo and the introduction of a global digital library with open access to all competitors, where you can engage with all of their data on all accidents over time. Now, that is usually regarded as intelligence that we protect at all times. And Volvo is saying, no, our north is safety. We'll collaborate and work with anybody out there to create safer roads, safer conditions, and that is how you uphold your brand. So the notion of co-opetition versus competition, a collaborative spirit is yeah, let's hope that becomes the dominant logic.
Absolutely. Carla, thank you so much. Yeah, maybe just as a margin entry, we would really want to look at co-optation, collaboration with yourself, in really, from our endeavors, our reason for being of developing ethical leaders for the common good, getting the understanding and the insights, around brand reputation and so forth. So we really want to thank you for your time today. Sincerely appreciate it. Colleagues, those of you who want to reach out to Dr. Carla, you can, she's on, you just Google her name, you'll find her. It's fine. And on LinkedIn and so forth. But maybe I just want to close off again, because to me it's so profound. The meaningful or purposeful brand, and giving credit to Carla for sharing that with us. A social construct that delivers and sustains a unique and meaningful value for all its stakeholders at every point of contact. Colleagues, let's take that away with us as we all individually and collectively aspire to make tomorrow beautiful and making the world a better place, and even considering our own individual brands and how it fits in and slots in the larger ecosystem. We wish you all the best. Stay safe. And until next time, God bless. And remember, tomorrow is beautiful. Thank you very much.
Privilege. Thank you so much.